Okay, this is everything I know about dialogue in 15 minutes. But before I suggest the medicine, we must first discuss the sickness. These are often the main problems when writing dialogue. 1. When should I use dialogue as opposed to narration, or for screenwriters just using background context for information? 2. How do I get the characters to say sharp, pointed, interesting, compelling things? 3. How do I make it sound not awkward or robotic? 4. How do I do things like world building, feeding important information into the dialogue? 5. How do I avoid boring my reader when only talking is happening? Before I begin, I do not suggest my advice as the gospel truth. Think of all good advice as objects circling a drain. Some objects are orbiting closer to the center of the drain than others, but ultimately all revolving around a central core idea. So feel free to lift what gets you closer to the center of the drain and leave all the others. First, story is all about cause and effect. Dialogue is a form of cause and effect. So imagine a game of table tennis. Once you set up the players on the other side of the board, you begin the chain of causation. All that follows is almost dramatic and effortless, right? Okay, because no one talks unless they want something. Okay, people only communicate because they desire something from the other, right? You want to comfort someone, you want to get them to feel heard, you want them to understand you, you want them to execute a task for you, you want them to refrain from a task, you want them to bond with you, blah blah blah, right? That table tennis back and forth is what we call intention and obstacle. What is intention? Intention is, what does he want, why does he want it, and why does he want it now? Okay, right? Someone wants something, someone is in their way. Intention and obstacle. Also, one person's obstacle is another person's intention, right? So it's like how math is reversible. 3 times 2 is the same as 2 times 3, right? One person's obstacle is another person's intention. Okay, so at the beginning of your page or your chapter or your outline, for every scene, you write this down. For every character in the scene. And 2, you apply what I call the filter, which is their personality plus their knowledge. What does this mean? It is knowing everything we know about this character and all that has happened so far in the story. How would this person react? 3 steps plus the personality plus knowledge, which is the filter, and you do that for every character in the scene. Okay, so if it's 2 characters, you do that for both characters. If it's 3 characters, you do that for the 3 characters. If it's 4 characters, you do that for the 4 characters. Then you start writing. A majority of the use of dialogue will be in scenes. What is a scene? A scene is a unit of a story, usually larger than a beat or a moment, but smaller than a chapter, usually, right? A scene depicts an event in which there is a possibility for change, or it is dramatizing a piece of conflict which goes in combination with other scenes to create a long chain of events to explore the entire arc of character or conflict across the story. But complex people in negotiation over something of narrative importance, and these scenes of conflict or negotiation of narrative importance bridged together by action beats as movement from one place to another, or a scene break, right? If your scene is not performing any of the 3, it does not depict a moment of potential change, it does not dramatize a conflict or negotiation among characters, it probably does not need to exist. Frankly, you can cut it, or at least does not need to be nearly as long-winded as you have written it, right? 2, do not ever say something that your audience already knows. If your audience already knows something, there's no need to say it again. You put them to sleep you will bother. Alright? Put that in narration if you're writing a book. Put that in narration. Jump right into the center of conflict. 3. A good tip is let the emotional valence or the emotional energy of your scene turn from beginning to end. So if the scene starts happy, it's a great idea to let them exit panicked or sad. If the scene starts where they enter joyful, it's a great idea to let them exit angry. If the scene starts with sorrow and misery, it's a great idea to turn and they exit with a smile or with some hope. Right? These should be moments of change for the character, moments where the character is making tough choices. Next, there's 2 kinds of scenes, right? There's moments where a character is explaining logistics, who goes where, what goes where. Think the scene at Interstellar where one scientist is explaining how a wormhole works. And there's moments, and there's the second kind of moment, which is moments where the character's inherent beliefs or their different positions are clashing. Think of the scene in Captain America Civil War, right? Every well-written scene will have both, but the second kind where characters are espousing their inherent beliefs or their different positions on matters clashing is always more compelling to watch and read. If you have too much of the first kind, that is the logistics style dialogue, your scene does not have enough tension. Characters are probably just going through the motions until Act 3. However, do not go overboard and start writing a philosophical treatise, right? People don't fight over ideas in a vacuum, they fight over things. So give them things to fight about that is then filtered through their different ideologies. What do I mean? Give the characters tough choices to make by a given set of circumstances. Let that be the vehicle by which the ideology is brought out. Do not just argue about ideas in a vacuum. This is not a YouTube debate. You are writing drama. Okay. The next tip is specifically for prose, which is that contrasting introspection with dialogue makes the character more dynamic and makes the dialogue many more levels much more interesting.
For example, I swung the door shut. John held it open. Hey, are you okay? You seemed quiet. Yes, I'm fine. Thank you. I appreciate it. As opposed to, I swung the door shut. John held it open. Hey, are you okay? You seemed quiet. If I had a penny for every time I'd been asked that question, I'd have enough money to have people thrown in a moat with crocodiles every time they asked me that question. Seemed quiet. Why was he talking anyway? He couldn't even talk up a tree if it winked at him and batted eyelashes. I spoke a fairly appropriate amount, whatever that was. Is silence always in error? As far as I was concerned, the ills of the world came from all too much talking. Yes, I'm fine. Thank you. I appreciate it.
The contradiction between the introspection and the dialogue or the action suddenly ratchets up how interesting the character is by several more magnitudes than if you just had the dialogue with no contrast, right? Interesting characters are made from contradictions, right? The sad jock, the proud beggar, the insecure king. These little contrasts between thought and dialogue make a character voice more punchy, more endearing, and draw the reader into the story much more. Next, the it sounds awkward and wrong problem. This is how to fix dialogue that keeps sounding awkward and wrong. Major tip is sound it out, right? Sound it out. This is a tip for the revision stage. Don't be doing this in your first draft. If you're on your first draft, this might not be for you. but sound the dialogue out. If it sounds weird out loud, you'll probably read out loud. 2, write in iambic pentameter. Watch this TikTok video of people imitating how different languages sound.
Relevant Don spreaded must on Sprex and tricks an anti-panny and Ponwalk on Linsburn. In his time, elf spruce to spiel a telf for spine. Thanks for listening. Breeze, Val Martin the dog at your rest. Ain't really feeling you call that trout, huh, Timbo? Quale stazione in particolato, legando il benetto chiamato Rothschild manevato, chi prese bene quale lato risata? Risata. Sì, però una tita attraverso che stazione è spore in un governo alla quale mere che non trattare di rasus, non tanto sconsupplicata. Sì, sì. Steine strankt und mich verlachten, und Reichstein ist in ganz blachen Wagen auf Banco kleines und gefrankt. Je prends pas sous les bebate, clémate, patron, je vance ma balance, va grand ce qu'il a tradit. Oui, oui. Brest, ugresti nie teraz bezdilnie, w dealie synko Kostorowski, bliż milia dyrektora Sushneto Pergranski op...
Notice how they don't say actual words, but anyone with a cursory knowledge of the word can detect the reading they are imitating, because every language has its own natural rhythm, right? The natural rhythm of the English language is iambic pentameter. That is a short syllable followed by a long syllable, then short, then long. Usually what is used in Shakespeare, something like
a tower of strength, hoodwinked or in a pickle, if you've knitted your brows, made a virtue of necessity, insisted on fair play, slept not one wink, stood on ceremony, danced attendance on your lord and master, laughed yourself into stitches, had short shrift, cold comfort, or too much of a good thing, if you've seen better days or lived.
Next, the rambling problem. How to avoid rambling on and on and on. The usual problem with dialogue is that we want to get the characters to talk about a specific idea or problem in the scene. The problem is how to get there, so we ramble around for several minutes before we approach the actual subject matter. A good way to avoid this is to start the scene late, right? Start the scene in the middle of the discussion, and then double back to fill in the details. Take out the clutter. Real life speech is often very tangential with a lot of highs and how are yous. Remember, you are making drama. You are not writing a documentary, right? That's why your audience bought the movie ticket. That's why they paid for the book. There is no deception here. They know what they came for. So supply the drama. The readers are intelligent and very capable, more capable than you think, of backfilling scene descriptions and scene directions later to orient themselves. In case they're not, that is what revision is for. That is what beta readers are for. If you run into a problem, you can fix that later. Also, get out early, right? Notice how characters talk in the movies rarely end with oh, okay, alright, bye, then okay, bye sort of sequence that we do on phone calls. They just dip out, right? But Sorkin suggested a very interesting solution to the rambling problem, which completely fixed my problem with rambling all over my scene. He says, imagine that the character was standing before God, and right there and then they had to make their case for why they had to be led into heaven. What would they say? In that situation, you have to be concise, boiling down your point into as compelling and moving a point as possible with no room for error. So think about that. Imagine like your characters were standing before God and they had to make their case to be led into heaven. Think about what they would say in that situation relative to the context of the scene and write specifically that, right? This helps you drill down to the specificity of the characters' situation, and specificity is a powerful tool to get your audience invested in the stakes, right? There are a million stories about boy or girl, man, woman saves the day. Why should they stick with your story about man, woman saves the day? This is because of the specificity of the person's character arc, the person's plight. So always be more specific, right? ABS instead of ABC. Always be specific. However, don't get too much in your head about this in the first draft. If you're on a hot streak, the words are flowing, you are in the zone. Just stay in the zone. Just flow with it. Usually your intuition in that moment with the dialogue will turn out mostly right. So just ride with it. The next problem, which is subject of a bit of debate, is people never speak directly or say what they actually mean. Problem, right? And that directness or being expressed with intent is sort of unnatural to human speech. This could be an entire video of its own, but here's my take on it. Take it or leave it. 1, dialogue is not real speech. Dialogue is a simulacra of real speech, right? It is like saying all paintings must be photorealistic. No, they don't. No, they don't have to be. Art is a representation of reality, just like dialogue is a representation of speech. Realistic speech is a kind of tone in media, but there can be other tones as well, such as Shakespearean tones used in plays and period pieces like Game of Thrones, or the rambling, stuttering dialogue used for comedic effect in shows like Family Guy or Smiling Friends, where part of the comedy is poking fun at situational speech flaws, right? Or the tone used in musicals where the audience suspends their disbelief, and it's perfectly fine that dialogue is communicated in music, right? The most important thing is tonal consistency. That once you start talking a certain way, you must keep it consistent to the work and the characters, unless the narrative supplies some exception as to why Rhaenyra Targaryen's son is saying Skibidi Riz or is speaking AAVE in Westeros, right? Then no one else should speak that way. If you pick a tone, like you pick a style of art, whether cubism, expressionism, or photorealism, you stick to it, unless the inconsistency is part of the point of the narrative, such as like a movie like Into the Spider-Verse, which uses different art styles to show different multiverses or something like that, right? All that being said, there is one thing that the characters shouldn't reveal, right? Every character has their fear and desire that is motivating their actions. That is like the basement where the monster that they don't want to confront lives. That is what people don't reveal. Right. Not only that, anything else that might betray the fact that the basement even exists, right? People will obfuscate, deny, duck and dodge, paper over it with rage or pride or feigned nonchalance. So when does it come out of the basement? When your character's fear and desire drives them to double down, leading to failure, that is the all is lost moment, right? After the plot punishes them for their fear and desire, then that is when it comes out of the basement. But till then, try and keep it to as much subtext as much as possible. As far as the rest of your plot and what the character should say and shouldn't say, go by the 3-step rule for intention obstacles. It's like a tennis game, right? What does he want? Why does he want it? Why does he want it now? Apply the filter of character personality. Then you have what they will see, right? If the character's personality is more extroverted and bombastic, the way they express will be different than if the character is muted and introverted. Now, if you've done this 3-step check for every character in the scene, if 2 characters in the scene answer the above questions exactly the same, try and see if you can leave one of them out of the scene. Okay, or trying to roll 2 of the characters into one character. It will avoid the situation where dialogue trails off into being boring because there is no opposition, right? There's no conflict happening. Conflict and tension is the lifeblood that keeps your reader engaged after you've done all the setup in Act 1. You need it, right? Okay. Now, using these 3-step questions, filter to the character's personality. That is the answer of what should my character say next? When should they say it? Right? If there's a character that answers these 3 questions differently than another character in the scene, or is diametrically opposed to the protagonist's ideology, try and find a way to bring them into the scene. Right? After you've done the setup, conflict is the engine that keeps your story going. Try and bring them into the scene somehow, right? Now, how do you explain world building, backstory, important information to your character in a scene? If you need to explain something to your audience, but everyone in the scene already knows a thing, introduce a character as a stand-in for the audience that requires to have things explained to them, such as Harry Potter in the Sorcerer's Stone. We don't realize it, but most of the first act is characters info dumping lore to Harry, but it doesn't come off as awkward because it is perfectly natural for a stranger in an environment to ask for things to be explained to them, right? In fact, Aaron Sorkin, when writing The West Wing, would use this tactic often because screenplays don't have the advantage of novels where you can just tell the reader in a narrative summary, right? If you're a novel writer, use this advantage, just say it in narrative summary if you need to. That is why books are not movies. That is the advantage. One of the advantages books have, you can just say it in narrative summary. Or you can also try this method. If you want to introduce backstory, just tell the reader they cannot have it. Simple, right? People always want specifically what they tell them what you tell them they cannot have, right? Take this bit of dialogue. Hey, so I talked to the doctor. Oh, good. Yeah, he said everything is fine. Right after I slapped him. You slapped the doctor? Is there any food? I'm starving. Oh my god. Wait. Right? And suddenly, if I'm reading, suddenly I want to know what happened before he entered the room, where I would ordinarily not really care, right? It's better than if you try to start force feeding the character at the beginning, the backstory, to be like, why are we wasting or spending time? This is completely unnecessary, right? You can do this story, telling your reader subtly that they cannot have the backstory, which ironically makes them want the backstory even more. Or you can introduce a situation where a character has to help another or motivate another to action, leading them to talk about what motivates them. Case in point, the various "when I was a boy" scenes by Kingpin in Daredevil, or you put an object in a room which triggers an interesting metaphor that maps onto your character's motivations or desires. Famous example are shark tanks in films, right? My final tip: for whether or not your characters say one thing or another, or conceal one bit of information or another, always lean towards what ratchets up the tension of the scene with the characters and forces them to make tougher choices the more that the plot goes on, right? For example, could you write a compelling scene where a character has a secret passion that he hides from his totalitarian father forever? Yes. Could you also write a compelling scene where the son does tell his father and they fight about it? Also, yes, right? Which of them forces the character to make the tougher choice, presses them into a tighter and tighter corner? 8 times out of 10, go with that choice that will always make your story better. The more difficult choices the characters are pressed to make, the more compelling they become, more tense your story is. Press them to the point where they don't even know how the hell they can get out of this, and you don't know how the hell they can get out of this, right? Why? Because your reader will sure as hell be wondering the same thing too, and will be on the edge of their seats. If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe for more great writing tips like this, and follow me on my writing journey as well. And if you like this, maybe you might enjoy some of the things I've written. Okay, thank you. Bye.